The council wanted humanity bound, until they realized only humans could save them. Part 1: Chains of Fear. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was silent. Thousands of aliens from hundreds of worlds sat in their floating seats, watching the center stage. Light from distant stars poured through crystal windows. This was Nexus Station, the heart of galactic civilization, where every major decision was made. High Arbiter stood at the center. He was tall and thin, with skin and 4 eyes that never blinked. His voice carried across the massive chamber without effort. "We have reviewed the evidence," said. "We have studied their history, we have watched their broadcasts, and we have reached a decision." On every screen in the hall, images of Earth appeared. Cities, weapons, wars, soldiers marching, bombs falling. The aliens watched with expressions of horror, disgust, and fear. "Humanity," continued, "is too dangerous to be allowed freedom among the stars." Somewhere on the edge of known space, Captain Park watched the same broadcast on a small, cracked screen. His ship, was old and tired. It made strange noises when it flew, but it was his and it was home. His crew gathered behind him. His engineer had grease on her hands and anger in her eyes. Lee, once a soldier, now stood with arms crossed and jaw tight, listened carefully, translating the alien words in her head. Han, the medic, simply shook her head slowly. "The binding protocols will take effect immediately," announced. "Humanity will be restricted to their home system. No colonization, no free trade, no military vessels. Patrol fleets will enforce these rules. This is for the safety of all species." The broadcast ended. The screen went dark. Nobody spoke for a long moment. "So that's it," finally said. "We finally reached the stars and they put us in a cage." "They're afraid," said quietly. "I've been listening to their communications for months. They think we're animals, monsters." Laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Maybe they're right. We did spend most of our history killing each other." "That doesn't make this fair," said. "We're not the same as we were. We've changed." Turned away from the screen. His face was calm, but his crew knew him well enough to see the storm underneath. "Changed or not, they've made their choice. We deal with what is, not what should be." The continued its mission. Officially, they were a cargo ship, moving supplies between the few human stations allowed to exist at the edge of their restricted zone. Unofficially, they were one of many ships keeping human communities alive despite the Council's rules. 3 weeks later, they stopped at a refueling station in neutral space. It was one of the few places humans could still go without being arrested. The station was old, dirty, and filled with aliens who looked at humans with suspicion or contempt. Was checking fuel prices when someone approached him. The alien was shorter than most, with blue-green skin and gentle eyes. He wore the robes of a council diplomat. "Captain Park," the alien said, "I am Ambassador. May I speak with you?" His hand moved toward his weapon, then stopped. "Ambassador, your council just locked my species in a prison. What could we possibly have to talk about?" Glanced around, then spoke quietly. "Not all of us agreed with the decision. Some of us remember history better than others." "What history?" "The history that shows empires built on fear always crumble." Stepped closer. "The Council fears what it does not understand. They see your wars and think that is all you are. They do not see your art, your music, your stubborn refusal to give up even when everything is lost." Studied the ambassador carefully. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because fear makes poor policy, Captain, and I believe a time will come when the Council regrets this decision very much." Pressed a small data chip into his hand. "Old records, from before the current Council existed. Read them when you have time, and be ready." Before could ask what he meant, walked away and disappeared into the crowd. That night, alone in his cabin, inserted the chip into his personal computer. The files were ancient, written in languages that had been dead for thousands of years, but his translation software worked slowly through them. The records spoke of a great war long ago. An enemy called the Scourge had swept across the galaxy, consuming everything in its path. Billions had died. Entire species had been erased from existence. The alliance that finally stopped them had sacrificed almost everything to push them back. But the Scourge had not been destroyed. They had been driven into hibernation, sent into the void between galaxies to sleep forever. Or so everyone hoped. The final file was a warning written by some forgotten commander. The Scourge adapt. They learn. They remember. If they ever return, we will need every weapon, every soldier, every species united. There must be no division. There must be no holding back, or all will be lost. Read the warning 3 times. Then he looked out his window at the stars, wondering if somewhere in the darkness, something ancient was starting to wake up. 1 week later, a distress signal arrived. It was automated, ancient, and broadcast on frequencies nobody had used in. The message was simple, repeating over and over in a dead language. They are returning, they are returning, they are returning. The Council received the signal and dismissed it as a system malfunction. An old satellite, perhaps, triggered by random cosmic radiation. Looked at his crew, they looked back at him. "We should check it out," said. "It's outside our permitted zone," warned, "if we're caught." "Then we don't get caught," said. He turned to the navigation console and entered new coordinates. "Something is wrong. I can feel it, and I'm not going to sit in a cage and wait for it to find us." They changed course and flew into the unknown. The research station floated in dead space, far from any star. No light reached it. No ships had visited it in centuries. It was a forgotten place, left to rot in the endless dark. They approached slowly, watched through the main window as the station grew larger. Even from a distance, he could see something was wrong. The metal hull was covered in deep scratches and burn marks. Parts of the structure had been torn away, as if something had tried to rip its way inside. "No power signatures," reported. "No life signs. Whatever happened here, it happened a long time ago." "Those claw marks are huge," observed. "What could make marks like that?" Nobody answered. They docked carefully. The airlock was damaged but managed to force it open. The team entered the station with flashlights and weapons ready. The air was stale and cold. Frost covered the walls. The first thing they found was a body. It was alien, a species didn't recognize, frozen solid and curled in a corner. Its face was twisted in terror. Its hands were pressed against its ears, as if trying to block out some horrible sound. "There are more," said quietly, her medical scanner active. "Dozens of them all over the station. They died terrified." They moved deeper into the station. The walls were covered in writing, carved directly into the metal. The same words repeated over and over in different languages, translated as they walked. "They are coming, they are coming, they eat and grow and remember, they are coming." "This is not making me feel better," muttered. They found the main computer room. Most of the equipment was destroyed, but one terminal still had power, running on a backup battery that had somehow survived centuries. Connected her portable device and began downloading whatever data remained. "This is going to take time," she said. "The files are corrupted. I'll have to piece them together." "Then we wait," said. "Keep your eyes open." Hours passed. The crew took turns standing guard while worked. Finally, she called them over. "I've got enough to understand what happened here," she said. "It's not good." The screens showed images and records from thousands of years ago. A great enemy had emerged from the void between galaxies. The records called them the Scourge. They were not one species but many, twisted together into a single hive mind. They consumed everything they encountered: planets, ships, entire civilizations. They absorbed technology and biology, constantly adapting, constantly growing stronger. "Every weapon the old alliance used worked once," explained. "Then the Scourge adapted. Energy weapons. They developed shields, physical weapons. They grew armor, biological weapons. They absorbed them and used them against their enemies. How did they stop them? Asked. They didn't, not really. The Alliance sacrificed almost everything to push the Scourge back into the void. They believed the Scourge would sleep forever in the cold darkness between galaxies. Paused. They were wrong. Pointed at one of the records. This station was a monitoring post. They were watching for signs of the Scourge returning. 300 years ago, they detected something. They sent warnings, but the Council at that time ignored them, just like the Council now. And then the Scourge came here, said. They killed everyone and moved on. The records end here, confirmed. But if the Scourge woke up 300 years ago, where are they now? His blood went cold. They're patient, they're watching, learning, waiting for the right moment. As if the universe was answering him, this communication system suddenly lit up with emergency broadcasts. Ran to the nearest terminal and listened. Her face went pale. A colony in the outer rim just went silent, she said. All communication stopped. Ships sent to investigate never reported back. Now a second colony is under attack, and a third. The broadcasts were chaos, panicked voices, screaming. Then silence one by one as each signal disappeared. And his crew rushed back to and left the dead station behind. As they flew toward Council space, they picked up more signals. Reports of massive ships appearing from nowhere. Creatures that swarmed through broken hulls. Weapons that stopped working after the first shot. The Scourge had returned. At Nexus Station, the Council met in emergency session. High Arbiter listened to report after report with growing disbelief. This could not be happening. The Scourge was a myth, an old story used to scare children. It could not be real. But the evidence was undeniable. Ambassador stood before the assembly and presented the ancient records that his family had kept safe for generations. The Scourge are real, said. They nearly destroyed our ancestors, and now they are back stronger than before. We must unite every species, every fleet, every resource. Every species, one council member asked, including the humans. The hall fell silent, every eye turned too. The High Arbiter's 4 eyes narrowed. He remembered the images of human wars, the violence, the chaos. He remembered the fear that had driven him to vote for the binding protocols. No, he said finally, we will handle this ourselves. We will not unleash one threat to fight another. The restrictions on humanity will remain. Stared at him in disbelief. Arbiter, we need every ship we can get. The humans are fighters. They survived on a hostile world for millions of years. They could help us. They are too dangerous, insisted. We do not know what they would do once freed. We cannot trust them. And if we fail without them? Asked. Had no answer. Listened to the broadcast of the council session. He heard its decision. He heard humanity being dismissed, rejected, left in chains while the galaxy burned. Slammed her fist against the wall. They would rather die than accept our help. Then let them die, said coldly. Why should we care? Shook his head slowly. Because if the Scourge win, they won't stop with the Council. They'll come for us eventually, for Earth, for everyone we've ever known or loved. So what do we do? Asked. We're one small ship, we can't fight an army. Was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at his crew with fire in his eyes. One ship can't, but we're not the only humans with ships. We're not the only ones who want to fight. He moved to the communications console. Time to call in every favor we've ever earned. Time to remind the galaxy what humanity can do. The war was going badly. Every day brought new reports of disaster. Council fleets, built for peacekeeping and patrol, crumbled against an enemy unlike anything they had faced before. The Scourge did not fight like normal enemies. They learned. They adapted. They remembered every trick used against them and developed defenses within hours. Energy weapons worked in the first battle. By the second battle, The Scourge had grown reflective armor that bounced the beams back at their attackers. Missile systems worked for one day. Then the Scourge released clouds of tiny creatures that ate the missiles before they could explode. Biological weapons designed to poison them were absorbed and turned into new mutations. The Council admirals were running out of ideas. 3 species had already pulled their fleets back to protect their, breaking the alliance apart. Panic spread across 1,000 planets. Refugees fled in every direction, clogging space lanes and overwhelming stations. On the intercepted Council communications and translated them for the crew. Their morale is collapsing, she said. Officers are refusing orders. Crews are abandoning their ships. They've lost 12 major battles in 2 weeks. Good soldiers don't help if the leadership has no plan, observed. They're fighting this war like it's a chess game. The Scourge don't play chess. They flip the board and eat the pieces. Had been sending messages for days, to old friends, to former enemies, to anyone with a ship and the will to fight. The responses had been slow at first, but they were coming in now. A smuggler named Bay answered from near the border. He had 3 ships and 10 fighters willing to fly. A retired military commander named Shin had gathered a small fleet of veterans who were tired of sitting idle. Mining crews, merchant captains, colonists with armed transports. One by one, they answered the call. By the time they all gathered at a hidden asteroid base, counted 42 ships. They were old. They were damaged. They were held together with tape and prayers, but they were ready. Stood before the assembled captains in a cargo bay that smelled of oil and sweat. Their faces were hard and serious. They knew what they were being asked to do. The Council doesn't want our help, said simply. They think we're dangerous. They think we're animals. Maybe they're right. But right now, while they sit in their stations and debate, people are dying. Colonies are burning. And the Scourge won't stop until they've eaten everything. He let those words hang in the air. I'm not asking you to save the Council. I'm asking you to show the galaxy what humanity really is. Not the wars they saw on our broadcasts. Not the monsters they imagined. The real us. The ones who fight when there's no hope. The ones who protect people even when those people hate us. Stepped forward. She was older-haired, with scars on her face from battles long past. You're talking about a suicide mission, Captain. I'm talking about making a statement, replied. If we die free. We die fighting. And we die proving everyone wrong about us. The cargo bay was silent for a long moment, then laughed, a rough and wild sound. I always wanted to die in a way worth telling stories about. Let's go save some ungrateful aliens. One by one, the captains agreed, not with speeches or grand gestures, but with nods and quiet words of commitment. They were humans. They didn't need to explain themselves to each other. The fleet moved out. Their target was a colony under siege. The Council Defense Force was breaking. 3 heavy cruisers had already been destroyed, and the remaining ships were falling back in disorder. The Scourge swarm was moving in for the kill. The human fleet arrived without warning. 42 small ships against hundreds of Scourge vessels. By any reasonable calculation, it was hopeless. Didn't care about reasonable calculations. All ships, he broadcast, remember what we practiced. Don't fight fair. Don't give them time to adapt. Hit them where they don't expect and keep moving. Make them fear us. The battle was chaos. Human ships dove straight into the Scourge formation, weaving between the massive alien vessels at speeds that should have been impossible. They didn't line up for clean shots. They didn't follow standard tactics. They crashed into enemy ships on purpose, then launched boarding parties that fought hand-to-hand inside the corridors. They set their own damaged ships to self-destruct and rammed them into Scourge command units. Led a team onto a Scourge cruiser and planted explosives in its reactor core. They escaped with seconds to spare, flying on a shuttle held together by some emergency repairs. Broadcast false signals on every frequency. confusing Scourge communications and making them fire on each other. Treated the wounded in this tiny medical bay, using techniques she had improvised in the chaos to keep people alive when all the proper equipment failed. The Scourge were ancient and intelligent. They had conquered galaxies, but they had never faced enemies like this. Enemies who didn't retreat when they should. Enemies who sacrificed themselves with smiles on their faces. Enemies who fought dirty and mean and refused to follow any predictable pattern. For the first time in the war, the Scourge hesitated, and then the colony was saved. At Nexus Station, High Arbiter watched the battle footage in his private chambers. He had expected the humans to die within minutes. Instead, they had won. Barely, at great cost, but they had won. Ambassador stood beside him. They lost 9 ships, he said, nearly 200 humans dead, and they were never thanked, never acknowledged. They fought for people who imprisoned them. Said nothing for a long time. His 4 eyes watched the footage again and again. The human ships moving in ways his admirals would never have ordered. The impossible tactics, the willingness to die. They fight like they have nothing to lose, he finally said. Shook his head. No, Arbiter, they fight like they have everything to protect. That's the difference you cannot understand. They're not fighting for themselves. They're fighting for each other, for their families, for their future. Turned away from the screen. His pride screamed at him to dismiss this, to continue believing humans were dangerous animals who got lucky once. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered that he was wrong. That he had always been wrong. And that if he didn't change, everything would be lost. Sat alone in his cabin. His hands were shaking. He had lost friends today. Good people who would never come home. He had made promises to their families that he didn't know how to keep. But they had proved something. They had shown the galaxy that humanity was not what the Council believed. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to change everything. There was a knock at his door. Entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She didn't say anything. She just sat beside him and handed him a cup. They drank in silence, watching the stars through the small window. Tomorrow there would be more battles, more death, more impossible choices. But tonight they had won, and that was enough. The announcement came 3 days after the battle. Every screen on every station across the galaxy carried the same broadcast. High Arbiter stood at the center of the council chamber, and his face showed no emotion as he spoke. After careful review of recent events, the Galactic Council has decided to lift the binding protocols on humanity, effective immediately. All restrictions on human travel, trade, and military development are removed. Furthermore, humanity is granted provisional full membership in the Council and is requested to join the defense effort against the Scourge. He paused. The next words seemed to cause him physical pain. We ask for your help. Across the galaxy, humans heard the announcement with mixed feelings. Some celebrated, others wondered if it was a trick. Many simply asked, why should we help those who chained us? But already knew the answer. The Scourge would not stop with the Council. If the galaxy fell, Earth would follow. This was not about revenge or pride. It was about survival. 1 week later, stood in the Council chamber on Nexus Station. He had never expected to be here. A cargo captain from a small ship, now speaking directly to the leaders of 100 worlds. Looked down at him from the high platform. Captain Park, your actions at the colony siege were unexpected, impressive, but one battle does not win a war. How exactly do you believe humans can make a difference when our most advanced fleets have failed? Met his eyes without fear. You've been fighting smart, Arbiter, using careful tactics, following logical rules, trying to outsmart an enemy that is smarter than all of us combined. He stepped forward. That's why you're losing. The Scourge learn from everything you do. They adapt to your logic. They predict your patterns. Then what do you suggest? Asked coldly. Stop fighting smart. Start fighting different. turned to address the entire chamber. The Scourge have one weakness. They expect enemies to behave rationally. They study patterns and develop counters, but humans don't always behave rationally. We do stupid things for emotional reasons. We sacrifice ourselves for people we love. We refuse to surrender when any logical being would. A council member from a crystalline species spoke up. You are suggesting we be unpredictable, but war requires coordination, discipline. How can an army function without rules? We're not asking your armies to change completely, explained. We're asking you to let humans lead key operations. We'll handle the chaos. You keep doing what you do best. Together, we'll give the Scourge something they've never faced before, an enemy they can't predict. The debate lasted hours. Many council members remained doubtful, but surprisingly supported the proposal. Perhaps the battle footage had changed his mind. Perhaps he simply had no better options. The vote passed. Human strategists were brought in to work with council admirals. At first, there was tension. The aliens thought humans were reckless. The humans thought the aliens were too rigid. But slowly, they learned to work together. The first coordinated operation targeted a Scourge supply line. Council intelligence had identified the route, but every previous attack had been predicted and countered. The humans suggested something different. Instead of attacking the supply line directly, they scattered random debris and radiation along the route. It caused no damage, but it confused the Scourge sensors. Then, while the Scourge were investigating the debris, a small human team snuck onto one of their cargo vessels and planted a special device that had designed. She called it a data bomb. The Scourge absorbed information from everything they captured, had created corrupted data packages designed to be eaten, fake blueprints, false tactical patterns, meaningless noise disguised as important intelligence. The Scourge consumed the false data and began experiencing errors. Ships flew into each other. Weapons systems targeted wrong coordinates. For the first time, the enemy that adapted to everything was adapting to lies. The tide began to turn. Led teams of human medics who didn't just heal wounded soldiers. They studied every Scourge corpse they could find, analyzing their biology. She discovered that the hive-mind connection had limits. Damage to certain neural clusters could disconnect individuals from the collective, leaving them confused and vulnerable. This information spread to every allied fleet. Trained soldiers from a dozen species in close-quarters combat. Most alien cultures had abandoned such fighting centuries ago, seeing it as primitive. But the Scourge were terrifying up close. Soldiers needed to know how to fight even when their weapons failed. Pain is not the end, told his students. Fear is not the enemy. The only true defeat is giving up. Everything else is just a situation to overcome. Worked with council communications officers, teaching them psychological warfare. They broadcast messages designed to confuse and frighten the Scourge. False reports of super weapons. Fake distress signals from non-existent fleets. Anything to make the enemy uncertain. Victory followed victory. Colonies were liberated. Fleets were rebuilt. Hope returned to a galaxy that had begun to believe all was lost. But the Scourge were not stupid. Their central intelligence, the Hive Core, analyzed every defeat and reached a conclusion. Humanity was the problem. These small, fragile creatures with their chaotic minds were disrupting everything. The solution was simple: destroy humanity first. Every Scourge fleet in the galaxy changed course. Thousands of ships, millions of creatures, all heading in the same direction. Toward Earth. Received the news on the... For a long moment, he simply stared at the tactical display, watching the massive wave of red icons converging on his home. They're committing everything, whispered, their entire force. They know we're the threat, said. Take us out and the rest of the galaxy falls. Checked his weapons, then we make them pay for every meter. Looked at, waiting for orders. The captain took a deep breath. He thought about Earth, about the cities he had grown up in, about the mountains and oceans and billions of people who had no idea what was coming. Then he thought about his crew, about the human captains who had followed him into impossible battles, about everything they had already sacrificed. "Send a message to every human ship," he said. "Tell them to come home, every fighter, every transport, every mining vessel with weapons attached. We're going to defend Earth." He paused, then continued. "And send a message to the Council. Tell them the Scourge are coming for humanity. If they want to help, now is the time. If not, we understand. Either way, we're fighting to the end." They turned toward Earth and engaged its fastest drive. The final battle was coming. Earth had never seen so many ships. Human vessels of every size and shape gathered in orbit, forming a wall of metal and determination. Old military cruisers pulled from retirement. Civilian transports with weapons bolted to their hulls. Mining ships carrying loads of explosive ore. Anything that could fly and fight was there. And they were not alone. The Council had answered. Not every species, but enough. Ambassador led a fleet of volunteers who had refused to let humanity face the end alone. Other aliens came too, some from species that had publicly condemned humans just months ago. They said little. Their presence said everything. Stood on the bridge of the, now upgraded with salvaged Council technology. Through the main window, he could see the blue marble of Earth floating in the darkness. His home. His reason for everything. "Scourge fleet entering the system," reported. "Thousands of vessels. The Hive Core is with them." The Hive Core was the brain of the Scourge. A massive organic structure at the center of their fleet, connected to every creature in the swarm. Destroy it, and the enemy would collapse into mindless chaos. Protect it, and nothing could stop them. Opened a channel to all ships. "This is Captain Park. In a few minutes we're going to fight the biggest battle in human history. Some of us won't survive. I won't lie to you about that, but I want you to know something." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "For years the galaxy called us dangerous, violent, unpredictable. They locked us away because they were afraid of what we might do. Today we show them what we actually do. We protect. We fight for each other. We refuse to die quietly." His voice hardened. "Today we are exactly what they feared, and that fear will save everyone." The Scourge fleet entered weapons range. The battle began. Ships died in the first minutes. Explosions lit up the darkness like new stars being born. The Scourge came in waves, endless and hungry, adapting to every weapon the defenders used. Shields failed. Hulls cracked. Crews screamed their last breaths into static-filled radios. But the humans did not break. Suicide runs crashed damaged ships into Scourge command vessels. Boarding parties fought in corridors filled with nightmare creatures, buying time with their lives. Pilots who had run out of ammunition flew their ships directly into enemy engines. Earth's moon was hit by a concentrated bombardment. The ancient surface cracked, sending debris spinning into space. On the planet below, people watched the sky burn and held their loved ones close. Fought from this bridge, coordinating impossible attacks and refusing to accept defeat. His ship was damaged in a dozen places. Smoke filled the corridors, but the engines still worked and the weapons still fired. "The Hive Core is hanging back," reported. "Heavy protection, we can't get a clear shot." "Then we make a path," said. Had been working on something for weeks. A modified version of her data bomb, designed not just to confuse but to destroy. If they could get it inside the Hive Core, it would tear the Scourge mind apart from within. The problem was delivery. The core was too well protected for missiles. It had to be done manually. "I'll take it in," said. "I've been working on capturing a small Scourge vessel. Their systems won't recognize it as a threat. I can fly it straight into the core." "You'd never make it out," said quietly. "Maybe not, but if I don't try, nobody makes it out." Stood up. "Then I'm going with you. You'll need someone to watch your back while you upload the virus." "Me too," added. "If either of you gets hurt, you'll need a medic." Looked at his crew, the people who had been with him through everything, the closest thing he had to family. "No," he said, "I'll clear the path myself. We'll create an opening. You three get the virus into the core and get out." Captain started. "That's an order," turned to face them. "I'm not asking, I'm telling. You survive this. You go home. You tell everyone what happened here." There were tears in his eyes, but she nodded, said nothing, but he clasped his hand firmly, simply hugged him. Remained on the with. Someone had to help fly the ship on its final mission. The captured Scourge vessel launched from this cargo bay. It was small and ugly, but had made it work. The 3 crew members inside watched as the pulled ahead, charging directly at the Scourge defensive line. Broadcast one final message, not to the fleet, not to the Council, to the entire galaxy. "This is humanity. We were told we were too violent, too dangerous, too unpredictable. Maybe you were right. But today our violence is your shield. Our danger is your salvation. Watch us and remember what we are willing to do for those we love. This is what it means to be human." The crash through the Scourge line. Weapons fire tore into the ship from every direction. Systems failed. Explosions ripped through the hull. Was thrown from her console, bleeding but alive. But the path was clear. His vessel reached the hive core, fought off the creatures that tried to stop them using every dirty trick he had ever learned, kept them alive through injuries that should have been fatal, and uploaded the virus. The effect was immediate. The hive core screamed, a psychic shriek that echoed across space. Every Scourge creature felt its mind torn apart. Ships collided, weapons fired randomly. The coordinated swarm became a chaotic mess. The remaining defenders pressed their advantage. The Scourge, leaderless and confused, were slaughtered. It was not a battle anymore. It was extermination. The virus spread through the entire Scourge network. In hours, the species that had terrorized the galaxy was reduced to mindless animals. The threat was over. 3 months later, Nexus Station hosted a memorial. Every species attended. Statues were built. Names were read. Songs were sung in 100 different languages. Was there, walking with a limp but alive. They had been destroyed but had dragged him to an escape pod at the last moment, and had survived as well, rescued from the wreckage of the hive core by a council rescue team. High Arbiter approached him after the ceremony. The alien leader looked older somehow, tired. "Captain Park said, I have something to say to you." Waited. "I was wrong about your kind. I thought your chaos was weakness. I thought your violence made you dangerous to us. I understand now that it was strength. Strength of a kind we forgot how to use." Nodded slowly. "Fear makes you see monsters, Arbiter. Sometimes you're just looking at survivors." Extended his hand in the human gesture of respect. "The Council has voted to grant humanity a permanent seat among us, not as guests, not as threats, as equals." Shook his hand. "That's all we ever wanted." Later that night, found his crew at a quiet bar on the station. They were drinking and laughing, but whole. Was explaining some engineering idea with wild hand gestures. Was arm wrestling an alien twice his size. Was teaching some card game. Sat down with them. They made room without pausing their conversations. It felt like home. Outside the window, stars filled the endless darkness. Somewhere out there, humanity was building new colonies, exploring new worlds, no longer bound by anyone's fear. The galaxy had thought they were monsters. They had proven themselves something greater, protectors, survivors, humans. And they were just getting started.